The notification arrived at 7:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on January 24, 2026, shattering the quiet of a Saturday morning and sending algorithms on Wall Street into an immediate frenzy. It wasn't a formal declaration of war, nor was it a piece of legislation passed through the halls of Congress. It was a post on Truth Social, less than 50 words in length, yet it carried enough kinetic energy to dismantle the economic foundation of the North American continent. President Donald Trump, in a move that historians and economists are already debating with fierce intensity, threatened a blanket 100% tariff on every single good crossing the border from Canada. This wasn't just a negotiating tactic. The specificity of the threat suggested a calculated dismantling of the USMCA. Welcome to the geopolitical ledger. Today, we aren't just looking at numbers on a screen. We are witnessing the potential end of the longest peaceful economic partnership in modern history. Before we dive into the catastrophic ripple effects that are about to hit your bank account, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Do you believe this aggressive protectionism is a necessary power play to assert American dominance? Or are we watching a geopolitical suicide that will hand the keys of the future to Beijing? Pause the video, leave your thought, and let's get into the breakdown. To understand the gravity of this situation, we must first strip away the political rhetoric and look at the sheer scale of the machinery that Trump just threw a wrench into. The United States and Canada do not simply trade with each other, they build things together. It is a relationship worth over $760 billion annually, a staggering $2 billion crossing the border every single day. For decades, this trade flow has been the unseen lifeblood of the American economy, so efficient and frictionless that most citizens forgot it existed. But invisibility does not mean insignificance. The catalyst for this sudden rupture was Ottawa's announcement of a strategic trade partnership with China, a deal aimed at diversifying Canada's export markets. Ironically, just 8 days prior, the White House had seemingly signaled tacit approval, or at least indifference, to Canada seeking new markets. The sudden reversal, framing Canada's pivot as a betrayal worthy of economic excommunication, has caught the entire Western world off guard. We are no longer discussing a trade dispute. We are discussing the abrupt decoupling of two economies that are joined at the hip. The immediate impact of a 100% tariff is not theoretical, it is mathematical, and for the American consumer, it is terrifying. Let's start with the commodity that drives inflation more than any other: energy. There is a pervasive myth that the United States is entirely energy independent. While domestic production is high, the refining infrastructure tells a different story. The U.S. imports roughly 4 million barrels of oil per day from Canada, accounting for 60% of all U.S. oil imports. This is heavy crude, the specific type that many American refineries in the Midwest and Gulf Coast are configured to process. You cannot simply switch these refineries to light sweet crude from Texas overnight. It requires billions in retrofitting and years of construction. If a 100% tariff is applied, Canadian oil becomes commercially unviable instantly. The supply shock would be unprecedented. Energy analysts project that within weeks of enforcement, gas prices at the pump would spike by $2 to $3 per gallon. This isn't just about filling up your tank. This is about the diesel that powers the trucks delivering food to your grocery store. The inflationary ripple would touch every single item on the shelf. But the energy crisis goes deeper than oil. It extends to the very lights turning on in your home. The North American power grid is a marvel of engineering integration, disregarding national borders to ensure stability. Approximately 85% of U.S. imported electricity comes from Canada, predominantly from the massive hydroelectric dams of Quebec and Manitoba. States like New York, Vermont, and Massachusetts are heavily reliant on this clean, consistent baseload power. A 100% tariff on this electricity would force utility companies to scramble for domestic alternatives that simply do not exist at that scale. We are talking about potential rate hikes of 20 to 30% for households in the northern states. And in a worst-case scenario, particularly during a heat wave or a polar vortex, rolling blackouts as the grid struggles to balance the load without the Canadian hydro battery. This is a vulnerability that few policymakers discuss, yet it represents a critical failure point in national security and economic stability. Moving from utilities to the roof over your head, the picture darkens further. The American housing market, already strained by high interest rates and low inventory, relies heavily on Canadian timber. Roughly 30% of the softwood lumber used to frame houses in the United States comes from north of the border. We have seen lumber disputes before, but never a 100% duty. The National Association of Home Builders estimates that existing tariffs already add thousands to the price of a home. Under this new regime, the cost of raw materials for a single-family home would skyrocket, adding approximately $30,000 to the construction cost. This effectively prices out millions of first-time buyers and ensures that the housing affordability crisis transitions from a chronic problem to an acute emergency. Construction projects would stall, layoffs in the building sector would follow, and the American dream of home ownership would retreat further into the distance. Perhaps the most complex victim of this policy would be the automotive industry. The manufacturing of cars in North America is a dance of logistics, where parts cross the border up to 7 times before a vehicle is finished. Steel from Pennsylvania goes to Ontario to be stamped, returns to Michigan for assembly, goes back to Canada for electronics, and so on. A 100% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum, and on the parts manufactured there, breaks this chain instantly. It doesn't just make cars more expensive, it halts assembly lines. Major U.S. automakers, which have spent 50 years building this integrated supply chain, would face an existential crisis. The cost of a new vehicle is projected to rise by roughly $4,000, but that assumes you can even build the car. The disruption would lead to immediate shortages, triggering a secondary market inflation similar to what we saw during the pandemic chip shortage. This is an industrial heart attack for the Rust Belt, the very region this administration claims to protect. As we analyze this unfolding economic disaster, if you appreciate deep dive analysis that goes beyond the headlines and looks at the raw data shaping our world, please consider subscribing to the Geopolitical Ledger. We are building a community of critical thinkers, and your support helps us continue this work. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming breakdown on the European theater. Now we must pivot from economics to the grand chessboard of geopolitics, because this is where the story shifts from painful to dangerous. By threatening to sever the economic artery with Canada, Washington is effectively forcing Ottawa to make a choice it has tried to avoid for decades. Canada is a resource-rich nation with a small population. It must export to survive. If the door to the United States is slammed shut with a 100% tariff, Canada cannot simply stop selling its oil, uranium, minerals, and lumber. It must find a buyer. And sitting across the Pacific with an open checkbook and a strategic hunger for resources is China. This tariff threat creates the perfect vacuum for Beijing to step in. We are looking at the possibility of Canada signing a full, comprehensive free trade agreement with China, not out of ideological alignment, but out of economic necessity. This would be a catastrophic failure of American foreign policy, pushing its closest ally and neighbor into the economic orbit of its primary global rival. The implications of a Canada-China alignment are staggering. We could see Canada applying to join the BRICS economic bloc, standing alongside Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This would give BRICS a foothold in the G7 and a physical presence on the North American continent. Furthermore, Canada is the world's second-largest producer of uranium, a critical component for both nuclear power and military applications. Historically, this strategic resource has flowed south to fuel American reactors. In a trade war, Ottawa could restrict these exports, prioritizing contracts with China or India, leaving the U.S. nuclear sector vulnerable. This turns a dispute over tariffs into a question of energy security and nuclear proliferation management. However, the nightmare scenario, the one that keeps Pentagon strategists awake at night, is the security dimension. The US-Canada border is the longest undefended border in the world. It is a testament to trust. But if Canada aligns economically with China, that trust erodes. We must consider the possibility, however remote it seems now, of Chinese influence translating into physical presence. Imagine Chinese state-owned enterprises building ports in the Canadian Arctic or upgrading telecommunications infrastructure in the Yukon. This would bring the Chinese military-industrial complex to America's doorstep. The Northwest Passage, rapidly opening due to melting ice, would become a contested shipping lane where the U.S. Navy would have to contend with a Chinese presence sanctioned by Ottawa. The strategic buffer that has protected the continental United States for 2 centuries would effectively evaporate. This chaotic move against Canada does not exist in a vacuum. It appears to be part of a disturbing pattern. In just the last 3 weeks, we have seen aggressive posturing regarding Greenland and renewed trade threats against the European Union. When you connect these dots, it suggests a systematic dismantling of the Western alliance structure. Whether this is intentional isolationism or a series of miscalculations, the result is the same: the fragmentation of the West. Every alliance broken by Washington is an opportunity seized by Beijing. The Belt and Road Initiative thrives on the instability of American relationships. By alienating Canada, the U.S. is essentially signaling to the world that it is an unreliable partner, accelerating the global move toward de-dollarization and multipolarity. The winner of a U.S.-Canada trade war is neither the U.S. nor Canada. It is the People's Republic of China. So, what does this mean for you, the individual, navigating this storm? While the geopolitical tectonic plates are shifting, the impact will be felt at your kitchen table. If this threat materializes into policy, the window for preparation is short. Financial prudence is now a survival skill. The first and most immediate advice is regarding energy. Fill your tanks and, if possible, lock in heating oil or propane contracts now. The spike in energy prices will be the first shockwave. Secondly, if you have been planning a major purchase, a car, a home renovation involving lumber, or large appliances, delaying is a gamble you likely will not win. Prices are poised to rise, not fall. Third, look at your debt. If this trade war triggers a recession, the Federal Reserve may be forced into a difficult corner regarding interest rates to combat the tariff-induced inflation. Refinancing variable rate debt now could save you thousands later. Finally, from an investment perspective, volatility is guaranteed. The sectors most exposed are consumer discretionary and manufacturing. Defensive sectors, utilities, specifically domestic ones not reliant on Canadian imports, healthcare, and consumer staples, tend to weather these storms better. But this is not financial advice. It is a reading of the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The household cost of this trade war is estimated to be between $3,000 and $8,000 per year for the average American family. That is the price of protectionism in a globalized world. The connections between our economies are not just lines on a map. They are the wires in our walls, the wood in our frames, and the fuel in our cars. Cutting them doesn't just hurt the other guy. It causes the entire system to bleed. As we watch the ticker tape and wait for the next post on Truth Social, we are left with a haunting realization. The North American continent, once the most stable economic fortress on Earth, has cracked. Whether that crack can be repaired, or whether it will widen into a chasm that separates the U.S. from its future, is the question of the decade. We will be here to track every development, every dollar, and every diplomatic maneuver. If you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe to the Geopolitical Ledger and share this video. The more people understand the stakes, the better prepared we can be. Until next time, keep your eyes on the ledger.